Today on the podcast, you will hear my interview with classical guitarist Rupert Boyd, one of the co-founders of a New York-based concert series called GatherNYC. What I loved about this conversation with him is really hearing about what it took to build a career in New York City from nothing. He came across the country with only a suitcase, across the world with only a suitcase from Australia to New York, and finished a degree and got started working. There's a ton of really practical advice in this episode about how do you entrepreneurially create your own career. And then I found it so inspiring to hear him talk about his concert series, Gather NYC, and the concepts behind it, the work that goes into it, the success that it's having. I know that you will also love this interview. Thanks so much. Please enjoy. Rupert Boyd, welcome to Crushing Classical.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to speak with you about all of the various exciting facets of your portfolio career and about the concert series that you started and you run in New York. But before we, jump into the meat of that, can you just introduce yourself to the people and tell a little bit of the story that brings us to this point in your career?
Sure. Well, I am an Australian classical guitarist living in New York City. And so probably that's a good place to sort of start giving my sort of life story. But I've been living in New York City now for over 20 years, so almost sort of half of my life. But I grew up in a town called Canberra, Australia, which is actually the capital of Australia, and started playing guitar, classical guitar, when I was 8 years old. But it was always something I just kind of did, and also, played cricket and played soccer and, went fishing and things like that. So music was something I started, early-ish in life, but never really found, that absolute joy for it until I was a teenager. And so from there, I decided to go to a conservatory in Australia. And after finishing my bachelor degree, I wanted to continue studying, but I had my sights on somewhere outside of Australia. And at that stage, I had never left Australia. I didn't have a passport, but I sort of thought about where I would love to go. And, sort of everything I could think about the rest of the world was based on sort of movies and books, and had no sort of real experience of the world around, but got fixated with New York City. For many reasons. One being there was a teacher in New York called David Leisner who I was really interested to study with him. But also, so many of my idols had lived in New York. And I'm talking people like Stanley Kubrick, the filmmaker, and Bob Dylan and Jimi Hendrix and John Lennon, and sort of all these musicians. So I knew there had to be something sort of special about New York City. And so I applied to the Manhattan School of Music, sent in an old VHS cassette tape. This was back in the, what was it, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And got accepted. And so got myself a passport and bought a one-way ticket to New York, thinking that I would be here for 1 year. If I could afford to do the whole master's degree, I'd be here for 2 years. And as I started with, I've been here now for almost 21 years. Just really have never left. But so I've since graduating sort of lived in New York City as a freelance classical guitarist. And so that brings us, to 2025, and still very much a classical guitarist, but also running a concert series called Gather New York City, Gather NYC.
I love it. I completely agree. I grew up not that far from New York City in Rochester, New York,
Mm-hmm.
but still always felt that same draw, that same unbelievably romantic draw to this incredible city that has sparked the careers of so many musicians. And to the draw of that city is so great that it can bring you from the complete other side of the world with a one-way ticket in your early 20s. Imagine the for me, I went to college, in my hometown at the Eastman School of Music. Imagine the uprooting and the terror of making a move like that at that kind of age. So I don't know if there's a question in that. Just a real celebration of what you did there.
Sure. Well, my first two impressions on arriving in New York was I was really surprised that the buildings weren't taller. I expected every building to be 80 or 90 stories high. So I was really surprised to find some buildings that were only, 5 or 6 stories high. But it was that, and also the realization that I arrived with a suitcase and a guitar, and I literally didn't know a single person in North America. I had met David Leisner, the teacher I was coming to study with, for like a day when he was visiting Australia. But that's it. I really didn't know anybody else here. And so in some ways, looking back on it, that seems quite daunting. I think at the time, though, I was 22 and just sort of really, really excited to be in New York, and also was coming to study. So I had, somewhere to be.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just sort of getting off a plane and trying to sort of make it in a town like New York.
Yeah, having that anchor, the anchor of school to get you started, to get you meeting people. Still, daunting is a great word for it. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit for people who are young now, for people who are about to start their careers now. What did that look like? Going from here I am in like my class for my master's degree, and I'm surrounded by this enormous, like unforgiving city. What kinds of steps brought you to an actual career from a classroom?
That's a great question. Well, I guess one way of answering it is I did my Master of Music at the Manhattan School of Music. And then at the end of it, I really did have that kind of freak out moment of like, what do I do next? Like, I am here 10,000 miles from where I grew up and from, my family. And so I was really sort of pondering, what am I going to do next? And I remember sitting in the cafeteria, drinking a cup of coffee and eating a bagel, and reading in a newspaper that someone had just given the Yale School of Music $100 million, and the tuition was going to be free. And so I sat down that afternoon and sent in my application. So then went to Yale and did an artist diploma for another 2 years. And so then I think at the end of that degree, again, sort of had that sense of, oh, wow, like what is next? And for a classical guitarist, there aren't any jobs. Like, we cannot get an orchestral job. There's sort of nothing really to apply for other than teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But in some ways, so I went from New Haven back to New York City, and I think just that feeling of not having a safety net just made me just have to do anything I could. So I remember, I pounded the streets, in the proverbial term, looking for work. And fortunately, with guitar, there are always students, I really enjoy teaching. So when I was able to get myself some jobs at like some of the music schools in New York City, like Greenwich House School of Music and the 92nd Street Y. And so found those, and then was peddling who I was as a soloist and a chamber musician at the time. I released an album that I had recorded at Yale University just as I was graduating. And so I remember sending that album off to anybody I could think of. I sent out hundreds and hundreds of copies of that album to presenters throughout the country, and found that, the success rate is always very small with things like that, just sending out pictures in the dark. But I did get some great concert invitations from that. One of the first being like the Newport Music Festival, now called Newport Classical. And that came about because the title of my first album was Valses Poeticos, which is this beautiful piece by Enrique Granados. And I sent it to the artistic director at Newport, and it was his favorite piece. And so I remember he got it in the mail, and he called me up and invited me to come. And then that was the first of many summers that I spent in Newport. And so we're going back sort of 17 years now or so since I did graduate from Yale. But it's always been just that sense of you just kind of have to do it. No one, especially, again, for a classical guitarist, where it's always going to be freelance. Like we can't land ourselves a job in an orchestra. So it's always us being self-employed and having to explore any avenues of performance opportunities, any sort of avenues of sort of employment in the music industry. And it really is just sort of throwing yourself out there and seeing what lands.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm an oboist, of course, so there are orchestral jobs. Those do exist, and the fact that an entire network of regional orchestras exists means that freelancing with orchestras is a thing that classical musicians can do. But it's not always easy, and it's not always straightforward, and there are definitely not enough jobs for the number of talented and qualified people out there. So in a way, your story is, while specific to you, just incredibly valuable for people to hear, that no matter what your teachers told you, there is not an orchestral job just sitting there waiting for you. There is not a job just sitting there waiting for you. So like all of the things I heard you say, that you like made an album happen and then you used that as a calling card and just sent it out over and over and over again, got a ton of rejection, got a ton of things happening. Meanwhile, you're teaching. So like you're taking care of the money part in a way that is also in its way artistically fulfilling. And you're scrounging solo opportunities for yourself by leveraging this album. And it is that kind of I am taking care of my own needs, and I am really like putting feelers out all the time, that kind of gumption that is required for a musician. So I'm really just glad to hear you tell that story.
Sure. Yeah. And it is obviously the same for any musician. And what I do love about the freelance lifestyle is that, I have really noticed over 17 years that some years I have a really busy performing schedule and I don't have very much time for teaching. And so I have to sometimes let a few students go, or sometimes they let me go because I'm not around often enough. And then I have had quieter seasons when I have been able to pick up more either gigs or more teaching. And so it is a very malleable career path, which is, I think, at times really scary. There is not any sense of security, from one year to the next, but it's really easy to sort of shape it. And I've always found, times that one sort of aspect, whether it being the teaching aspect or the performing or just even doing sort of gigs, whenever one of those aspects has been a little bit more slim, I've been able to sort of shape my career in the other directions.
Yeah. Because the entrepreneurial skill to like reach out and put an offer into the world, say, hey, I have openings in my studio. Hey, I have some free weekends in August. Would you like to hire me for a thing? That skill translates across all of those.
Exactly.
Of those different parts.
And it has always helped to have had this feeling of it's sink or swim. It's really like if I felt like if I was never going to make it in New York, I was going to have to buy that, return flight back to Australia and sort of go back there with my tail between my legs, feeling like, I enjoyed my time, but I never quite made it. And so that's always been sort of this real motivator that I don't have a sort of safety net now. And obviously now after 21 years, I do have much more, I have a wife and a son here, and I have much more, a sort of reality in New York City. So there's not that sort of feeling of having to go back to Australia, but it is still, there isn't a huge safety net anywhere. So that still very much motivates me every day to be always finding more, opportunities and continuing the freelance career.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, among the things that you have created for yourself is this concert series. Will you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm really excited to hear about it.
Sure. Yeah. So, in addition to being a performer, about 6 years ago, my wife and I started GatherNYC, and it's a Sunday morning concert series. And so now in the past 6 years, we have hosted over 125 of these concerts. And sort of in a nutshell, it's an alternate to church. So it's a Sunday morning concert series where we mimic the idea of a church, but the only mention of religion is music. And so credit where credit is due, the series is modeled after one in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which it was originally called Church of Beethoven.
Hmm.
Nowadays it's called Chatter. And yeah, they are really trying to mimic the church environment, creating sort of some spiritual nourishment, providing these hour-long concerts. So 6 years, well, I should say that my wife and I have performed at Chatter in Albuquerque many times over the years. Actually, our first concert ever as a duo. Our duo is called Boyd Meets Girl. Our first concert together was in 2013 at Chatter in Albuquerque, and we'd always had in our heads, like, what if we could bring this experience to New York? And so in 2018, we found everything that we needed to make it happen. And yeah, and we run now every other Sunday morning at the Museum of Arts and Design in Columbus Circle. And so the concert is 1 hour long. It's mostly music, but a little bit of storytelling in even a brief celebration of silence. And so what visitors can expect is that we open doors at 10:30 and we serve complimentary coffee and pastries. And then at 11 o'clock, the concert starts. Every week we have different ensembles or different artists performing. And it's usually about a 15-minute or so musical set, followed then by a storyteller. And we get sort of local New York City storytellers who will tell a story in the style of the Moth, which is basically, I think the Moth has just two rules. One, it has to be memorized, and it has to be a true story. So people often get up and tell, poignant stories about their life, stories about the city. It's just something that's interesting, and that goes for 6 or 7 minutes. And then after that, we have a 2-minute celebration of silence. And this is just a moment for everybody to just feel sort of a sense of repose. That especially in a city like New York, it's rare that we have any time where we're not sort of running from one thing to the next, or checking out emails on our phones, or trying to do something. So we encourage the audience to just sit in silence for 2 minutes. And then the music continues after that for another half hour to round out an hour-long concert.
Amazing. Amazing. Like one of the things that there are so many things that strike me, actually. Thing one, I keep hearing about this Chatter Albuquerque concert series. You are not the first and not the second and maybe not even the third person to mention the amazingness of this series in the couple of years I've been doing this podcast. So hooray for them. Hooray for that. Secondly, to bring music, storytelling, food, community, and like that moment of peaceful repose and silence together. I love it. I love it. I hear how that mirrors a church going experience, but for me.
Right. Well, the idea is that we're welcoming everybody, that anybody who wants to come and just find a sense of community, but seek some sort of nourishment and hear some great music, this is the place for you. Yeah. And we try and make it as welcoming an environment for people of all ages, all backgrounds. Yeah, so and it is really nice. We have a core group of people who come week after week, and then always new people who are coming along. And we do notice that people are starting conversations with each other. And so that really is this idea of creating something that doesn't have any sort of affiliation to a particular religion, but just that same sense of community.
Yeah, amazing.
And yeah, no, full kudos to the Albuquerque crew doing their Chatter. They've also started Chatter PDX in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, cool.
And yes, and Laura and I, we actually performed there last weekend. And they've started up just in the past year, but they're doing an incredible thing out there too. Wow. So I would encourage everybody to check out Chatter PDX and Chatter ABQ.
Amazing. That's really cool. Can I ask about the money? Because I imagine performers are paid for this experience. I imagine audiences are paying money to attend. I imagine that the complimentary coffee and pastries, like somebody's buying those. Mm-hmm. And as the showrunners of this experience, I imagine you're getting paid. Like, can we talk about how this was created?
Sure. Yeah, we always want to make sure that everybody is paid. I think as is the state of everywhere in the arts, we always wish we could pay more.
Of course.
But but yeah, we don't ever. I mean, there would be people who would play for free, but we've never wanted that to be the case. Like we really know how much work goes into playing a concert and even promoting the concert, all of that. So we want to ensure that everybody's paid, whether it's the musicians, the storytellers, and the other reality too is it's really expensive. And we also try and keep our tickets fairly modest. Tickets are $30. We let children in under 12 for free. And then ticket sales never could cover all of it. So I think one thing that Laura and I have learned is getting much better about making asks. And so Gather started off with some private donations. And so now we're 7 years into running Gather, we are still actively sort of making asks for private donations, but we're also getting grants. We've, over the past year, been very fortunate to have gotten some nice grants from the New York State Council of the Arts and other organizations. And so it's private donation, grants, and ticket sales. And it's always a combination of those three. And yes, it's been a big sort of learning curve for Laura and I, coming from just being people on stage as the performing musicians to go behind the scenes of organizing a concert. And I don't think either of us ever fully appreciated how much sort of effort went in to creating a concert. It's not just sort of opening the doors an hour before and being there. There's many emails in advance and much thought and time. And nowadays also the grant writing and sending out requests and organizing galas. It almost could be a full-time job, but it's one of the various activities we both do. It certainly does keep us on our toes.
Yeah, absolutely. Even just the amount of people managing to bring in a storyteller and an ensemble or a performer for every other week for 7 years. The easiest performers, like the easiest, most unfussy, most self-sufficient performers still need that like set of emails back and forth telling them where to show up and what time to show up and what they should bring with them and how to market their CD sales. And not everybody is the easiest possible performers to work with, I'm guessing.
Fortunately, most of the artists we've had have been totally wonderful and totally lovely. But yeah, with Gather, like we do have a very strict concept that we really want it to be an hour. We never wanted to go for 45 minutes or to go for an hour and 15 minutes. And so that does require making sure that the repertoire choices are the right length, making sure that everything does run and flow smoothly for that 1 hour. Mm-hmm. So that is, that's always taken, several emails to express before the day of the show. And then during, the morning of the show, really making sure that everyone understands, okay, that after the storyteller, there will be a 2-minute celebration of silence. And for anybody who hasn't done that before, that is kind of a novel concept. And so, yeah, you're right, that just things like that do require more than just sort of mentioning it once in an email.
Yeah. It's more than just hand holding. Like there's a lot of people skills involved here.
Exactly. But fortunately, everybody we've worked with has been great.
Amazing.
And in 125 shows, we have brought in like 123 different ensembles.
Right.
It's the full sort of gamut of sort of classical music, and we sort of really do love bringing in classical groups, but also groups that are classical adjacent. So anyone who can really sort of be at the fringes of what it means to be classical music in the 21st century. Don't mean to sort of name drop too much, but we really have been so fortunate to be here in New York City that we've been able to present just some incredible acts. So we've had people like the Juilliard String Quartet, Dover, Brentano, Attacker, and the Public String Quartets, violinist Rachel Barton Pine, clarinetist Anthony McGill, We even presented Loive in her, like, I believe her first ever public performance. I don't know if you know her. She's this incredible cellist and singer who, at the time she had about 250,000 Instagram followers when we presented her. And I think now is millions and millions, and is working with the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Is winning Grammys. Is just an incredible artist.
Yeah. Wonderful. Like what a fantastic thing. Can I jump back to something you said
Sure.
about how you and Laura both are just getting better at making asks? And this is so difficult for so many of the musicians I talk to, right? There's sort of this feeling of like, if I haven't figured this out, if I am not self-sufficient, if I cannot fund this myself, or if the money is just not flowing to me, then I must be doing it wrong. I have talked with a lot of people who have a lot of fear about those kinds of asks for private donations, for like support for your vision. How is it not just begging? How do I, how can I remain, I don't know, like sovereign myself while I'm also like asking for help? This is a concern that a lot of people have. I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, I think what we've found is that a lot of people are very happy to support. That especially we have a number of like real fans of Gather. And they sort of really love how Gather has become a regular part of their life. And so we always look at our regulars, and every year we do our sort of pitches asking for help, and we are a 501c3, so we can take tax deductible donations. Mm-hmm. And so we have a number of people who just really love what we are doing, and they are really happy and willing to support. And then I guess we have gotten better just at that idea of making the ask, knowing really that the worst someone can say is no, or possibly just completely ignore any asks we make. Mm-hmm. But I mean, obviously we always want to ask with a lot of tact, but we are providing a great experience in New York City. And I think everybody we ask knows that. And we say, like, we are just trying to keep GatherNYC alive. So I guess, we have gotten a lot better learning this over the past 7 years. But we do find that people are sort of, if they are capable of giving some money, they are often quite happy to, if they do really appreciate and support what we're doing. And so it hasn't, it's always sort of a little bit, a difficult thing to do, but yeah, we find that people are really, really wanting to help us make this happen because they appreciate it so much.
That's amazing. The thing that I really want to highlight from what you said is that people want to help, that people like to support things that they believe in.
Exactly. Yeah, and we're never sort of just asking, we're not asking for money for ourselves in any way. We're asking for money to be able to present another sort of 18 shows next season. And so at the moment we're running every other week. Our grand plan is either next season or the following to go back to having every week. And so the Chatter ABQ and Chatter PDX, they do 50 Sundays of the year. We sort of feel like that might be a little taxing in New York just because summers are always a little bit wild and all that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we really hope to do every week going from sort of October through May or even early June.
Amazing. That's really, really inspiring. Thank you so much for describing all of that. This conversation is such a pleasure, and I know that people are getting so much value out of hearing the breakdown of how you're making all of these things happen. Can I just ask, is there anything that you would like to share with the listeners that I haven't made space for yet in this conversation?
No, I guess one piece of advice that always comes back to me, and this is it's not in any ways trivial, but it's a very small aspect of GatherNYC. But it's for anybody who is interested in starting up something like a concert series where you can get non-profit status, get the 501c3. Really good idea to do that early on. It does require a lot of hoops to jump through. You have to create a board, things like that. But we waited just a little bit too long, and our budget was over the threshold, which I'm not sure if it's changed, but at the time was $50,000. And when your budget is over that, you have to fill in a form that is 30 times longer, and it's so much more complicated. So we just wish we had have done the filing of that form a year or so earlier. It would have saved us a lot of hassle. So that's just one thing to keep in mind for anybody who is starting up a concert series. Really great to try and get that done early on.
Makes so much sense, and like sort of rhymes with some of the things that you're already talking about. Like, just do the thing before you totally feel ready. Put the things in place. Like, you're 22 years old, you get on a plane. Are you ready to make a career in New York? I don't know. Let's find out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for musicians, the classic saying is you have to really love it, because it's a crazy way to make a living. And if you don't love it, it's so much sort of turmoil and so much effort. There are much easier ways to make money and make a living than being a musician. But yeah, if you love it, I mean, I've always felt like there really isn't any alternate. It's kind of sink or swim. Like, either you go out there and you find students and find gigs and that, or you don't. You go off and do something else. So yeah, I mean, I think, as you're saying, you just kind of have to do it. There's really no alternate.
Yeah. Yeah. Gorgeous.
And sort of, and going along with that too, the other great piece of advice is expect rejection. The 0.1% of students who go through the main conservatories in the United States can probably go off and have people approaching them to play concerts and play concerti. Everybody else is going to get rejected. Literally everybody else. And it's hard not to take it personally, but you have to realize that there's so many people competing for the same kind of jobs, the same, donors to give to concert series, that rejection will always happen. And so I've always felt it's just sort of part and parcel of being in the creative arts.
That's lovely. And it goes right along with what you were saying about making the ask. The worst thing they can say is no. And if you don't ask, they don't have the chance to say yes.
Exactly. Yes.
Fantastic. Rupert Boyd, this is a fantastic conversation. Where do people follow you and where do people find out more?
Great. Well, GatherNYC can be found at gathernyc.org. And I can be found at rupertboyd.com. And then my cello and guitar duo with Laura Metcalf, who's the other co-director and co-founder of Gather, is boydmeetsgirlduo.com. But yeah, we're also everywhere you look on the internet, all the social media, all the streaming services, you'll find us.
Amazing. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.